The sound that Daniel remembered most afterward wasn't the footsteps, or the breathing, or even the way the door clicked shut. It was the sudden silence. A silence that didn't make sense in a high school at 3:37 p.m., the time when hallways usually explode with noise. Freshmen sprinting for the bus, clubs meeting in classrooms, teachers dragging half-broken carts to the copy room. But not that day, at least not on the second floor. Up there, in room 213, everything felt like someone had turned down the world's volume. The kind of stillness where even shuffle of papers sounded too loud. Daniel sat alone at his desk, surrounded by scattered notes, a laptop half-charged, and the faint smell of expo markers that somehow lingered even though no one used them that period. His English teacher, Ms. Hart, had stepped out a few minutes earlier. "I'm running to the printer real quick, 2 minutes," she'd said, already halfway out the door, keys jangling, coffee cups sloshing dangerously in her hand. Daniel nodded, barely looking up. His project was due at midnight, and he'd wasted the last 2 weeks on everything but work. Group chats, cafeteria gossip, a basketball game he didn't even watch. Everything except the assignment sitting right in front of him. Now, he had no choice but to stay after school and finish it. He typed for a bit, zoning out in the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Then, a metallic click broke the quiet. Quick, sudden, sharp enough to cut through the air like a needle snapping. Daniel stopped typing and turned in his seat. The door was shut. He didn't remember it being shut. The room had been open when Miss Hart left. She always propped the door open with the rubber wedge because the hinge squeaked like crazy. But now the wedge was pushed aside, and the door stood perfectly closed. "And the latch is down," Daniel mumbled, squinting. The latch above the knob, one of those tiny school-issued deadbolts meant for lockdown drills, was slid completely into place from the inside. He got up slowly. The hallway beyond the door was dim, lit by the usual end-of-day sunlight dying through the windows. But he didn't see anyone, didn't hear anyone. Just the low rumble of a distant janitor's cart somewhere far down the corridor. He pressed a hand to the cold metal latch. Pushed upward. It didn't budge. He pushed harder. The latch resisted like something was holding it down from the other side. He froze, confusion flooding his chest before fear ever had a chance to. "What the hell?" he whispered. He tried again, using both hands this time. Nothing. It wouldn't move an inch. His eyes drifted up, slowly, almost unwillingly, to the small rectangular window embedded in the door. A shape filled it. Daniel's throat tightened. Someone stood directly outside the door. A tall figure, shoulders slightly hunched forward, face lowered enough that their eyes were right at the level of the window, staring straight at him. Daniel took a step back. The figure was wearing a dark jacket, maybe navy, maybe black, something bulky like winter outerwear, even though the building was stuffy and warm. But it was the lanyard that made Daniel's stomach twist. A staff ID. Except the card attached to it had no name, no photo, no barcode. It was blank, just a plain white rectangle. Daniel's breath slipped out in a shaky exhale. Hi?" he managed, raising a hand awkwardly, like he was greeting someone he didn't know if he should recognize. The figure didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't move. Daniel felt the urge to look away but couldn't. Something about the figure's stillness made the air in the room feel heavier, like the humidity before a storm. Finally, Daniel forced the words out. "Can you unlock the door?" Nothing. The figure didn't even tilt its head, just breathed slowly, the fog forming small circles on the glass. Daniel backed up until he bumped into his desk. His pulse hammered in his ears. This had to be some mistake. Maybe a custodian he didn't recognize, or some substitute he hadn't seen before. But then why lock the door? And why stand so still? He reached for his phone, trying to keep his movements slow, non-threatening. His hand trembled as he typed out a message to his teacher. "Hey, someone locked me in your classroom. Are you close?" He hit send. Then he looked back at the door. The figure had moved. Not much, just a slight adjustment like it had leaned closer to the window. Its face was now inches from the glass. Too close. Daniel jumped. The phone almost slipped from his hand. He swallowed hard and tried another angle. "Okay, maybe you locked it by accident," he said, voice cracking as he tried to sound casual. "Could you just, pull the latch up?" Still nothing. The figure's breath fogged the window more heavily, the condensation spreading in uneven, slow circles. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He needed someone else in the hallway, anyone. He stepped away from the door and yelled out, "Hello? Hey, can someone help?" His voice echoed down the empty corridor, bouncing off the lockers and tile. No footsteps responded, no doors opened, just that heavy silence. Daniel grabbed his backpack, slinging it onto one shoulder, as if holding something would make him feel less exposed. His mind scrambled through a dozen possibilities. Maybe the school was doing some kind of security sweep. Maybe the person outside was confused. Maybe a faint vibration buzzed in his palm, his phone. He opened it. No message from Ms. Hart, but a notification from his friend popped up, someone he'd texted earlier. "You good?" Daniel began typing back. "Come to 2013 now." But before he could hit send, he noticed movement at the door again. The figure's head slowly, deliberately tilted sideways, not in curiosity, more like evaluation. Like it was studying how Daniel reacted. A chill crawled down Daniel's spine. He shouted again, louder this time. "Hello? Can someone come here?" For a moment, he thought no one had heard him. Then, footsteps, fast ones, coming up the hall. Daniel nearly collapsed with relief. Mr. Reyes, the janitor, rounded the corner, pushing a large trash cart. "Daniel, you yelling for me?" Daniel pointed at the door, voice trembling. Someone locked me in." Mr. Reyes frowned, stepping closer. "Locked you in? Who?" He looked at the window. The figure was gone, just empty hallway. Daniel's stomach dropped. They were just there," he insisted, stepping closer to the window. "A tall guy, jacket, no ID photo. They were holding the latch down." Mr. Reyes's expression shifted instantly, concern mixed with something else, something Daniel had never seen on the usually calm janitor. Slowly, Mr. Reyes used his master key to unlock the deadbolt from the outside. The door clicked open easily. Daniel stumbled out, scanning both ends of the corridor, but the figure was nowhere. "What exactly did they look like?" Mr. Reyes asked, his voice low. Daniel explained everything. The blank badge, the weird staring, the way the latch wouldn't move no matter how hard he pushed. With every detail, Mr. Reyes's face grew tighter. Finally, he said, "There was a report earlier. Someone walking around acting like staff. Front office couldn't verify him. Security's been trying to find him all day." Daniel's skin prickled. "Do they know who he is?" he whispered. Mr. Reyes shook his head. "No, and he's not in the building anymore. We checked. Every room, every hall." Daniel felt ice spread through his chest, not because the man disappeared, but because he vanished so quietly, like he knew this school better than all of them, like he had walked these hallways before. And the worst part? Daniel realized the man hadn't seemed confused or lost or mistaken. He seemed patient, too patient, like he'd been waiting for Daniel to be alone in that room, like he had planned it. Security added extra sweeps the next day. Teachers were instructed to lock their classrooms if they ever stepped out, even for a moment. Students weren't allowed to stay behind alone anymore. Most people at school joked about it, said the fake staff guy was just some homeless guy or a confused visitor. But Daniel knew better. He still remembered the way that figure stared through the glass, not like a stranger, more like someone checking whether the room had the right student in it. The girls' restroom in Building C had always been an uncomfortable place, even for the students who claimed not to believe in its reputation. The rumors started quietly, whispered between freshmen and sophomore girls. The third stall from the end had something in it, that sometimes the stalls would slam on their own, that faint voices could be heard from the tiles if you listened closely enough. Alyssa had shrugged it off in previous years. She had never experienced anything abnormal. She had never noticed anything strange, until the day in late October, junior year, when she finally entered alone and realized how wrong she had been. Fifth period had stretched interminably. Her math teacher, normally calm, had insisted on one more example of slope and y-intercept, and it had turned into a 20-minute ordeal of corrections, student complaints, and groans echoing through the classroom. By the time the bell rang, Alyssa's body felt like lead, and her mind swirled with frustration, fatigue, and the mild anxiety of a full homework load. She wanted just a few moments to herself, a pause from the noise of other students and the relentless ticking of the day. Walking down the hallway toward Building C, she noticed the usual chaos. Lockers banging, laughter spilling from clusters of girls, sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor, the janitor's mop dragging along with a high-pitched squeal. She kept her gaze down, earbuds in, music whispering against her eardrums, meant to calm her nerves but barely cutting through the sensory overload. Her heartbeat kept time with the sounds around her, quick, skipping, staccato. Something about the hallway that day felt heavier, though she couldn't explain why. When she pushed the restroom door open, the noise of the hallway vanished as if it had been swallowed. Silence hit her immediately, an oppressive, almost physical weight pressing against her eardrums. Not the quiet of an empty room, but a thick, alive silence that seemed to stretch, lingering in corners and along walls. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, a barely perceptible pulse, and the air carried the faint, sterile smell of bleach mixed with old soap. It was cold, though the rest of the school was warm that day. The chill clung to her arms through her thin sweater, raising goosebumps along her skin. Alyssa's eyes traveled along the row of stalls, 7 in total, the third from the end slightly ajar in the shadows, or at least it looked slightly different. The other stalls gleamed pale under the flickering lights, but that one, it seemed to absorb light. She paused, backpack clutched tightly to her chest, the straps digging into her shoulders. She tried to steady her breathing, counting silently to 10, telling herself it was just her imagination. She had heard the rumors, that was all, just rumors. She moved closer to the mirror, her reflection catching her eyes, tired, wide, wary. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear and set her backpack down, trying to focus on brushing it aside, adjusting it, pretending she was just a normal student in a normal bathroom. But the sensation of being watched crept over her in a wave, subtle at first, then growing, crawling up her spine and settling heavy between her shoulder blades. She told herself she was overthinking, she was imagining things, but she could not shake the feeling that the shadows were alive. Then she heard it, a soft, uneven breathing from the far end of the bathroom. Her heart stopped, her entire body froze. Alyssa's eyes darted toward the stalls. 6 were empty. 1, the third from the end, was closed. She swallowed hard. "Hello?" she whispered. The breathing stopped. Silence fell, thick and weighty, pressing her shoulders down. And then it returned, slightly louder, deliberate, slow. Someone was inside, waiting, listening. Alyssa took a cautious step forward. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you need help?" Nothing. Then a faint whisper. "Can you stay?" Her pulse surged. Alyssa's stomach dropped. The voice wasn't high-pitched or childish, but deeper, hoarse, controlled. Not frightened, not crying, just intentional, measured, commanding. I can get a teacher," she whispered, voice shaking. "Or the nurse, or..." "No." The word cut through the silence sharply. Her palms were cold, her chest tightened painfully. Okay, she stammered. "I'll stay. But you have to at least show yourself. Are you hurt?" Silence, long enough to feel eternal. Then, faintly, "Please, don't leave." Her stomach lurched. She wanted to run, to leave, but something rooted her to the spot. The voice was patient, deliberate, calm, almost hypnotic. She forced herself to look at the bottom of the stall door. Nothing, no shoes, no shadow, only darkness. Her mind raced, frantic. Who is this? How is no one visible? Are they crouching, hiding, waiting? Her hair prickled, the cold in the air crawling along her spine, raising goosebumps. Every small sound, flickering lights, the faint hum of the ceiling, a distant cough, sent a jolt through her body. She could feel her heartbeat thrumming against her ribs, each beat sharp and fast. And then it happened. All 7 stall doors slammed shut simultaneously. The sound rattled the mirrors, made the soap dispensers clink violently, and sent a shiver down her spine that made her legs nearly give way. Alyssa gasped, stumbling backward, clutching the counter. Her phone slipped slightly from her grip. Panic surged, raw and unrelenting. I'm leaving," she shouted, voice breaking, bolting toward the exit. The hallway erupted as she burst out. Students froze mid-step, staring. A history teacher rushed toward her. "Alyssa, what's wrong?" There's someone in the bathroom," she gasped. "They were whispering." The stalls. They all slammed. "Stay here," the teacher commanded, and walked into the restroom without hesitation. Alyssa hugged herself, trembling violently. Her chest heaved with rapid, shallow breaths. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The teacher emerged, pale-faced, jaw tight, eyes wide. "There's nobody inside. Every stall is empty," she said. "No, I heard them. They answered me. The breathing, the voice." "I checked every stall. There's no one in there," the teacher repeated, voice low but strained. Alyssa's hands shook as she followed the teacher to the office. She sank onto the bench, sipping water slowly, trying to steady her racing heart, but she could still hear it. "Please don't leave," security was called. Alyssa huddled behind the monitors. They rewound to 11:48 a.m. A figure appeared, a girl in a dark hoodie, head low, hands shoved into her pocket, walking toward the restroom. Her steps were unnaturally precise, deliberate, measured. Alyssa's pulse hammered against her ears as she watched. The figure entered the restroom. Then nothing. No exit, no hallway footage, not stairwells, not doors, nothing. She had simply vanished. Alyssa obsessed over every detail, every flicker of light, every dripping faucet, every creaking floorboard in her mind made her jump. She avoided the bathroom entirely. Other students reported similar things: whispers, stalls moving, faint shuffling sounds. The third stall became legendary. Even years later, Alyssa swore she could still hear it in the back of her mind. "Stay with me." The memory never left. She never returned to that restroom. She never forgot the darkness in that third stall, the patience in the voice, the deliberate slamming of the doors. For her, it was not just a story. It was a living memory, unshakable and permanent. The auditorium at Westridge High was a place Lucas had always liked during the day. Sunlight streaming through high windows, the polished wooden floor, rows of neatly aligned chairs, and the stage that felt larger than life. It was a place where imagination took shape, where students performed, sang, recited, and practiced. But tonight, it was something else entirely. Lucas had stayed late to help set up for the upcoming school play. The rehearsal had ended early, but he'd volunteered to check lighting cues, move props, and make sure the stage equipment was ready for the next day. He had expected some quiet. He had expected empty rows, maybe the hum of the heating system, maybe the distant sound of janitors in the hallways. He had not expected this. The first thing he noticed was the silence. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It pressed against him, heavy and almost alive. The high ceiling of the auditorium amplified the absence of sound, making the smallest movements seem louder. His sneakers squeaked slightly against the polished wood as he crossed the stage to adjust the props. The shadows of the chairs stretched across the floor, long and thin under the dim emergency lighting, like black fingers reaching for him. Lucas took a deep breath. "Just focus," he muttered to himself. "It's late. I'm tired. There's nothing here." But as he adjusted the position of a chair near the front row, a soft noise caught his attention, a whisper. At first, he thought it was his imagination. He paused, straining to hear. The auditorium was empty. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling lights. He shook his head and muttered, "Get it together, Lucas." He continued, but the whispers returned, faint, unintelligible, coming from somewhere between the far rows and the stage. Each time he moved, the sound seemed to shift, always staying just out of reach, just at the edge of hearing. Lucas's heartbeat picked up. He told himself it was the acoustics, the way the sound bounced off the walls and ceiling. But the whispers weren't random. They seemed deliberate, purposeful, as if someone, or something, was mimicking the rhythms of his own footsteps. He stopped at the center of the stage, the wooden floor cold under his sneakers. The emergency lights flickered slightly, shadows jumping across the auditorium in a rhythm that seemed unnatural. Lucas ran his hands through his hair. "Okay, maybe it's just the lights," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm imagining things." He moved toward the back of the auditorium to check the lighting, his steps careful, slow. The faint smell of dust and old wood filled the air, but beneath it, he could swear he smelled something else, faintly acrid, like smoke or burning fabric, almost imperceptible but enough to make his stomach tighten. Then, he saw it. A movement in the corner of the room, a figure, dark, shadowed, too large to be any normal student. It didn't move, quickly, didn't approach. It simply stood there, half hidden behind the stacked chairs near the side wall, just at the edge of the dim light. Lucas froze. His throat tightened. He blinked. The figure didn't move, but he felt its presence. It was deliberate, patient, almost waiting. He swallowed, trying to convince himself he was seeing things. Maybe a janitor, a teacher. He had been so focused on the props he hadn't noticed anyone else. "Hello?" His voice barely rose above a whisper. The figure did not respond. It didn't move. It only seemed to watch. And then, almost imperceptibly, the shadows around it seemed to ripple, as if the figure was somehow merging with the darkness itself. Lucas's mind raced. He took a cautious step backward, but the floorboard beneath him creaked loudly, echoing across the empty auditorium. The figure flinched, or maybe it didn't. It was impossible to tell. His pulse surged. He felt trapped, though he could leave. The doors were wide open at the back. But something in him didn't want to turn his back. Something in him demanded he see it clearly. He took another step forward. The figure remained still. Then, suddenly, a whisper, soft and deliberate, echoed from the darkness. "Why are you here? Alone?" Lucas's stomach dropped. He stumbled back, his hands gripping the edge of the stage railing. His eyes darted around. The auditorium seemed to stretch, the rows of chairs appearing longer, the shadows deeper. The flickering lights made the corners warp, twist, and he could swear he saw movement where there shouldn't be any. "Who's there?" he managed to say, voice shaking. Silence. Then the whisper again, closer, almost in his ear. "Don't leave. Stay with me." His legs felt frozen. He wanted to run, but the air felt thick, heavy as if it slowed his movements. Every muscle tensed, his heart thundering painfully in his chest. He could feel the darkness pressing in, curling around the edges of his vision. Alyssa's voice from his memory, no, not Alyssa, his own rational thoughts, screamed at him, "Get out! Just leave!" But curiosity, or maybe fear itself, pinned him there. He glanced at the figure again. Now it had moved slightly closer, or perhaps he was imagining it. His breath came fast, shallow. Suddenly, a chair tipped over in the far corner, falling with a loud crash. Lucas jumped violently, nearly losing his balance on the stage. The figure didn't move, but now he could see it more clearly. A human-shaped shadow, larger than a student, faceless, completely dark, as if all light had been absorbed. The whispers grew louder, layered, as though multiple voices were speaking at once. "Stay! Stay! Stay!" Lucas stumbled backward, bumping into the props table. He grabbed a spotlight to defend himself. The beam flickered weakly, cutting a slice of light through the darkness. The figure recoiled slightly, then disappeared entirely into the shadows, leaving the whispers echoing around him. He ran, across the stage, through the rows of chairs toward the exit. But the auditorium seemed to stretch endlessly. Every step felt like it took hours. The whispers followed, soft but insistent, haunting him with each echo. When he finally burst out into the hallway, gasping for air, the lights overhead seemed normal again, the noise of the school faint but comforting. His hands shook uncontrollably. He looked back at the auditorium door, empty, silent, nothing to indicate what had just happened. For days afterward, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about the shadows. Every quiet moment, every dark corner, every flickering light made his pulse quicken. Rumors spread that students had felt watched in the auditorium. Some reported whispers at night, chairs shifting when no one was there, props moving. Lucas never stayed late again. The stage lights, the polished wooden floor, the empty rows of chairs, everything reminded him of that night. He could still hear the layered whispers echoing in his mind. "Stay with me. Don't leave." Even years later, he swore he could still feel the presence, patient, deliberate, and always waiting. The auditorium was no longer a place of creativity or imagination for him. It had become something alive, something hungry, something that remembered him. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that it would wait for the next student foolish enough to be alone.